Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. When you're done watching, share this story. Someone might need to hear it. My name is Lauren, and I learned that the person who destroys your family doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes they're sitting right across from you at Sunday dinner, wearing a headscarf they bought on Amazon and perfecting their brave face for the cameras. I need to start this story 2 years ago, before everything fell apart. Before I knew what my sister was really capable of. Before I understood that some people will weaponize your love and turn your compassion into their personal ATM. My sister Veronica is 3 years younger than me. Growing up, we were close, not best friend close, but normal sister close. We fought over clothes and bathroom time. We covered for each other when we missed curfew. We had each other's backs in the way siblings do, even when you're annoyed with each other 90% of the time. But somewhere in our 20s, things shifted. I went to nursing school, got my RN license, started working night shifts at County Memorial. Veronica bounced between jobs, retail, receptionist work, a brief stint trying to become an influencer that never quite took off. She was always chasing something bigger, always convinced her breakthrough was right around the corner. Our parents, Helen and Thomas, were in their early 70s. Dad had retired from his job as an electrician. Mom had been a school secretary for 30 years before retiring. They weren't wealthy, but they'd been careful. They had their house paid off, a decent retirement fund, some savings. They were comfortable. That's when Veronica got sick. It started subtly. She'd mention feeling tired at family dinners. She'd cancel plans last minute, saying she wasn't feeling well. Mom would worry, of course, because that's what mothers do. Dad would suggest she see a doctor, get some blood work done. Then one Sunday in March, Veronica arrived at our parents' house for dinner wearing a headscarf. The moment Mom opened the door and saw her, she burst into tears. Veronica stood there on the porch, her eyes already wet, and whispered, "I didn't want to tell you like this." We all rushed to the living room. Dad's hands were shaking. I felt my stomach drop. Because I'm a nurse, I know what a headscarf on a young woman usually means. I know what comes next. Veronica sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and told us she had ovarian cancer. Stage 3. She'd been diagnosed 3 weeks ago. She'd already started chemotherapy. The headscarf was because she was losing her hair. She was scared. She was trying to be brave. She'd wanted to keep it private until she knew more, but now she needed our support. Mom sobbed. Dad looked like someone had punched him in the chest. I immediately went into nurse mode, asking questions about her oncologist, her treatment plan, which hospital, what her prognosis looked like. Veronica had answers for everything. She was seeing Dr. Morrison at Westside Cancer Center. Her treatment protocol was aggressive but promising. She couldn't remember all the medication names, but she had pamphlets at home. She'd been doing this alone because she didn't want to burden anyone until she absolutely had to. I hugged her. I told her I'd go with her to her next appointment. I told her she should have told us sooner. I felt awful for every petty thought I'd ever had about her. That was my first mistake, not questioning anything because I was too busy feeling guilty for not knowing my sister was suffering. Over the next few months, Veronica's cancer became the center of our family universe. She'd show up to Sunday dinners looking pale and weak. She'd talk about how brutal the chemo was, how the nausea made it impossible to work. She'd cry about losing her hair, about feeling like her body was betraying her, about being scared she wouldn't survive. Mom and Dad were devastated. They'd always bobbied Veronica. More than me, she was the younger one, the one who seemed to need more support, and now their protective instincts went into overdrive. Dad started writing checks. First, it was for her rent because she couldn't work. Then it was for medical bills that insurance supposedly wouldn't cover. Then it was for special supplements her naturopath recommended to help with treatment side effects. Then it was for energy healing sessions. Then it was for a medical credit card debt she'd racked up. I watched my father, a man who'd worked his entire life and saved carefully, write check after check without hesitation. Because what else do you do when your daughter has cancer? Mom went with Veronica to appointments, or at least, she drove Veronica to the hospital and waited in the parking lot because Veronica insisted she wanted to go into treatments alone. "I need to do this part by myself," she'd say. "It makes me feel stronger." I offered multiple times to go with her, to use my medical connections to get her better care, to talk to her doctors. She always had a reason why that wasn't necessary. Her doctors didn't like having too many people involved. She felt overwhelmed by too much input. She needed to maintain some independence in this process. Red flags? Absolutely. But here's the thing about watching someone you love go through cancer: you don't want to be the person who makes it harder. You don't want to add stress. You don't want to be the skeptical one demanding proof while everyone else is being supportive. So I swallowed my questions and just tried to be there for my sister. By month 4, Veronica's fundraising began. It started with a GoFundMe. One of her friends set it up: "Help Veronica fight cancer." The story was compelling. Young woman battling aggressive cancer, can't work, mounting medical bills, brave fight against the odds. The photos showed Veronica in headscarves, looking pale and thin. The updates talked about hard days and small victories. The donations poured in. Friends, extended family, people from our community who barely knew her. $5,000 in the first week. $10,000 by the end of the month. Then her friend group organized a fundraiser event. A pink night for Veronica at a local event hall. Silent auction, raffle baskets, donation jars, the whole thing. Tickets were $30 each. Local businesses donated items. The community showed up in force. Mom and Dad were there, of course, greeting people and thanking them through tears. Veronica sat at a special table, looking frail and grateful, hugging supporter after supporter. There was a slideshow of photos from her childhood playing on a screen. Pink ribbons everywhere. Testimonials from friends about how brave she was. I worked that night. I couldn't get off my shift, but Mom called me afterward, crying happy tears because the event had raised $18,000. $18,000 for Veronica's medical expenses. Combined with the GoFundMe and the money our parents had already given her, Veronica had received over $40,000 in 7 months. For a cancer she didn't have. I didn't know that yet. I was still believing every word. Still feeling guilty every time I had a flicker of doubt. Still telling myself that I was a terrible sister for letting tiny inconsistencies bother me. But those inconsistencies were adding up. Like how Veronica never actually looked like someone going through chemotherapy. I've worked with dozens of cancer patients. I know what chemo does to a body, the specific kind of exhaustion. The skin changes. The way weight drops off in a particular pattern. Veronica looked tired and thin, but it wasn't the same. It looked more like someone who wasn't eating much and wasn't sleeping well. Her hair loss seemed off too. She wore headscarves and occasionally wigs, but I never saw her actually bald. She never had the patchy regrowth pattern you get with chemo. When I hugged her head always felt like it had peach fuzz, not the smooth baldness of someone who'd lost everything. Her stories about treatment were vague. As a nurse, I wanted details: which chemo drugs, what her white blood cell counts were, whether she'd needed any transfusions, how her CA-125 levels were responding. She'd get defensive when I asked, saying I was stressing her out with too many medical questions. And she never ever let anyone actually go into the hospital with her. But I pushed those thoughts down because doubt felt like betrayal. If she really was sick, my skepticism was cruel. If she really was fighting for her life, me questioning her was monstrous. Then came the trash incident. It was a Sunday afternoon in October. I'd stopped by Veronica's apartment to drop off some groceries. She'd mentioned being too weak to shop. She wasn't home. I let myself in with the spare key she'd given Mom and left the bags on her kitchen counter. As I was leaving, I noticed her bathroom trash can was overflowing. Without thinking much about it, I pulled the bag out to take it to the dumpster on my way out. Just being helpful, the bag split as I was lifting it. Contents spilled across her bathroom floor, and that's when I saw it, a hospital bill. Not an explanation of benefits from an insurance company, an actual itemized bill from Westside Cancer Center for an appointment that had happened 2 weeks earlier. The same day Veronica had told us she'd had a brutal chemo session that left her vomiting all night. I picked up the paper with shaking hands. The appointment type was listed clearly: annual well-woman exam, routine gynecological checkup. No mention of oncology, no mention of Dr. Morrison. It was a 30-minute appointment with a Dr. Patricia Hughes in the Women's Health Department. The charge was $150, nothing about $1,000 chemotherapy infusions. I stood in her bathroom, staring at that piece of paper as my brain tried to reorganize 2 years of reality. This wasn't a chemotherapy appointment. This was a regular checkup. The kind every woman gets yearly. My hands went cold. My nursing instincts kicked in before my emotional response could catch up. I took a photo of the bill with my phone. Then I carefully looked through the rest of the trash. 3 more bills, all from Westside Cancer Center, all for routine appointments. Pap smears, mammogram, follow-up consultations, preventive care. Normal, healthy person medical visits, nothing about cancer. Nothing about oncology, nothing about chemotherapy. I took photos of every single one. Then I put everything back in the trash, tied up the bag, took it to the dumpster, and went home. I didn't confront her. I didn't call my parents. I sat in my car in my own driveway for 45 minutes trying to breathe. Because if those bills were real, then everything else was a lie. If those bills were real, then my sister had faked cancer. If those bills were real, then she'd manipulated our elderly parents out of tens of thousands of dollars. If those bills were real, then she'd scammed an entire community into donating money for medical treatments that never happened. I needed to be absolutely certain before I accused her of something this monstrous. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a detective. I started with the bills I'd photographed. I called Westside Cancer Center's billing department, pretending to be Veronica needing to clarify charges. They pulled up her account. I asked if they could confirm what my recent oncology charges were because I was confused about what my insurance had covered. There was a pause. Then the billing rep said very carefully, "Ma'am, I'm not showing any oncology services on your account. Your appointments have all been with Dr. Hughes in Women's Health, routine preventive care." I asked if maybe the charges were under a different department. She checked. Nothing, no oncology. Visits, no Dr. Morrison in their system. No chemotherapy infusions. Nothing. I thanked her and hung up. My sister didn't have cancer. My sister had never had cancer, but I needed more proof. Because if I was going to burn her entire lie to the ground, I needed documentation that was irrefutable. I used my medical access carefully. I couldn't look up her records directly, that would be a violation, but I could verify providers. Dr. Morrison, the oncologist she'd claimed was treating her. He existed, but he'd retired 8 months before Veronica's supposed diagnosis. He wasn't treating anyone. The medication names she dropped in conversations, I looked them up. 2 of them were real chemotherapy drugs. The other 3 didn't exist. She'd made them up, and no one had fact-checked her because we were too busy being supportive. I reached out to an old classmate who worked in medical records at Westside. I didn't ask for anything illegal. I just asked if she could confirm whether a patient named Veronica Hayes had been treated by oncology in the past 2 years. She checked the general logs, no privacy violation, just confirming departmental involvement. No record of Veronica in oncology. Ever, I had my proof. My sister was a fraud, but I didn't confront her yet. Because anger, as hot and justified as it was, needed to be strategic. If I confronted her privately, she'd lie. She'd gaslight. She'd create some elaborate story about mix-ups and misunderstandings. She'd make me look like the villain for doubting her. If I told my parents first, they wouldn't believe me. They were too invested. They'd accuse me of being jealous or cruel. Veronica would cry and manipulate, and I'd be the bad guy. I needed the exposure to be public, undeniable, impossible to spin. I needed everyone who'd been conned to see the truth at once. So when Mom mentioned that Veronica's friend group was planning another fundraiser, a second anniversary, still fighting celebration, I knew exactly what I had to do. I told Mom I'd love to help organize. I volunteered to put together some materials for the event. I offered to handle the PowerPoint presentation of Veronica's journey. Mom was thrilled. It would mean so much to your sister to have you involved. The fundraiser was scheduled for mid-November at the same event hall. Same setup, silent auction, raffle, donation jars. About 100 people expected. All there to celebrate Veronica's survival and contribute to her ongoing treatment costs. I spent the 2 weeks before the event gathering every piece of documentation I could get legally. I made copies of the bills I'd photographed. I got a printout of Westside Cancer Center's oncology providers, showing Dr. Morrison's retirement date. I pulled together a timeline of her actual medical appointments versus what she'd claimed. I created a simple, clear presentation. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. The night of the fundraiser, I arrived early. I wore a dress. I smiled. I hugged people. I played the supportive sister. Veronica looked beautiful. She'd clearly been styling her hair loss carefully, wearing an elegant turban that actually looked fashionable. She'd lost weight, probably from the stress of maintaining such an elaborate lie. She worked the room like a pro, accepting condolences and encouragement with practiced grace. Mom and Dad sat at the head table, looking proud and heartbroken and grateful all at once. The event started with dinner. Then there were speeches. Veronica's best friend got up and talked about her bravery. A representative from a local cancer charity spoke about the importance of community support. Mom gave a tearful speech about watching her daughter fight and how proud she was of Veronica's strength. Then it was my turn. Told the organizers I wanted to give a speech as Veronica's sister. They'd been delighted. They set up the microphone for me. The room went quiet. I started normally. Thank you all for being here tonight. It means everything to our family to see this kind of support. Smiles around the room, Veronica beaming at me from her seat. When Veronica first told us about her diagnosis 2 years ago, our world stopped. Cancer is every family's nightmare. Watching someone you love go through that kind of fight is devastating. Nods, sympathetic faces, Mom wiping her eyes. As a nurse, I wanted to help however I could. I offered to go to appointments to talk to doctors, to use my medical knowledge to support my sister. But Veronica insisted on handling her treatment privately. She wanted to be strong on her own. Veronica's smile was starting to look a little fixed. I respected that, even though it was hard, even though I had questions. I pulled out my folder of documents. Questions like why her hospital bills show only routine gynecological appointments. No oncology visits. No chemotherapy. The room went silent. Veronica's face drained of color. Questions like why the oncologist she claimed was treating her actually retired 8 months before her supposed diagnosis. I started distributing copies of the documents to the tables nearest me. People grabbed them confused. Questions like why Westside Cancer Center's billing department has no record of her ever being treated for cancer. Mom stood up. Lauren, what are you? She doesn't have cancer. My voice was steady, loud, clear. She never had cancer. Every appointment on these bills is for routine preventive care. Pap smears, mammograms, annual checkups, the medical care of a completely healthy woman. Veronica started to speak, but nothing came out. The GoFundMe raised $11,000. This fundraiser last year raised $18,000. Mom and Dad have given her approximately $35,000 from their retirement savings, all for a disease she doesn't have. The room exploded. People shouting questions. Veronica's friends rushing to her. My parents frozen in shock. I held up the final document. This is a letter from Westside Cancer Center's Medical Records Department confirming that Veronica Hayes has never been treated by their oncology department. I obtained it legally with proper procedure. It's real. Everything else has been a lie. Veronica stood up, knocking her chair over. Her turban had slipped, revealing a full head of hair underneath, carefully pinned to look sparse. "You vindictive bitch," she started. "Take off the turban," I said calmly. She didn't move. "If you really lost your hair to chemotherapy, take it off. Show everyone, prove me wrong." Her hands went to her head, protective. Everyone was staring. "You can't, can you? Because you didn't lose your hair. You just styled it to look like you did. You bought headscarves and practiced looking sick and learned what to say to make people believe you." Mom finally found her voice. "Veronica, tell her she's wrong. Tell everyone this is a mistake." Veronica looked at Mom, then at Dad, then at the 100 people staring at her with dawning horror and betrayal. She ran, just bolted for the exit, pushed past people, fled the event hall. The room erupted into chaos. Some of Veronica's friends chased after her. Others crowded around me, demanding explanations. My parents sat at their table, looking shattered. The event organizers were frantically trying to figure out what to do. I gave copies of all my documentation to anyone who wanted them. I answered questions. I explained how I discovered the truth. I showed timeline after timeline proving the scam. Within an hour, the event hall was empty except for the organizers, my parents, and me. Dad looked at me with tears streaming down his face. "All of it, everything was fake." "All of it," I confirmed. "She's healthy. She was never sick. She manipulated all of us." Mom was in shock, just sitting there, staring at nothing. The aftermath was brutal. The story spread our community like wildfire. By the next morning, it was in the local news. Local woman allegedly faked cancer to scam family and community. The GoFundMe was frozen pending investigation. People who donated were furious. Some wanted refunds. Others wanted her prosecuted. Veronica disappeared. She wasn't at her apartment. She wasn't answering calls. She'd completely vanished. 3 days later, she finally called Mom. She was staying with a friend 2 hours away. She was sobbing. She claimed she'd gotten confused, that she'd had precancerous cells years ago and had blown it out of proportion in her mind, that she'd never meant to lie, that it had just spiraled out of control. Mom listened to the whole thing, then said quietly, "Lauren found your hospital records, Veronica. We've seen them. You never had precancerous cells. You never had anything. You lied to us for 2 years and took money we needed for our retirement." Then Mom hung up. That was 3 months ago. My parents are still dealing with the financial damage. $35,000 is gone. They'll have to postpone some of their retirement plans. They've contacted a lawyer about possibly recovering the money, but it's complicated. Veronica spent most of it on rent, lifestyle expenses, and things that are hard to reclaim. The GoFundMe platform refunded most of the donations after their investigation. Some donors declined the refund and asked that the money go to an actual cancer charity instead. Last I heard, Veronica was living out of state and had unfriended or blocked everyone from our hometown on social media. My relationship with her is over, permanently. There's no coming back from this level of betrayal. My parents are heartbroken, not just about the money, but about losing their daughter. Because the Veronica they thought they knew doesn't exist. She's a stranger who wore their daughter's face while robbing them blind. Mom asked me recently if I regretted exposing her publicly. If maybe I should have handled it privately in a way that didn't humiliate Veronica in front of the entire community. I told her the truth. No, I don't regret it, because Veronica didn't just lie to our family. She lied to 100 people who donated money they couldn't afford. She exploited the compassion of an entire community. She weaponized one of the most devastating diseases humans face. She looked cancer patients in the eye at support groups and pretended to be one of them while they were actually dying. That kind of fraud deserves public exposure. That kind of manipulation deserves consequences. Did I take satisfaction in watching her world crumble that night? Honestly, yes, I did, because I'm tired of protecting people who hurt others. I'm tired of keeping secrets to avoid making waves. I'm tired of prioritizing a liar's comfort over the truth. Veronica had 2 years to come clean. 2 years to stop. 2 years to feel remorse. She never did. She just kept taking and taking with no plan to ever stop, so I stopped her, and I'd do it again. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been manipulated by someone you loved, if you've ever had to be the one to tell the truth when everyone else wanted to keep pretending, share it. Leave a comment. Let me know I'm not alone in this, because some families survive betrayal, but some don't. And I'm still figuring out which kind mine is. Thanks for listening. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be complicit in someone else's lie, even when that someone is family.